Ever since its inception in 1963, Lamborghini has become one of the most recognizable supercar brands in the world. From the get-go, there has always been a rivalry with Ferrari, and while Ferrari is still outselling Lamborghini, the margin is getting smaller and smaller. There are obvious similarities between the two brands, but the initial vision of the founders couldn't be further apart. Enzo Ferrari did care about his road car department, but it's no secret his passion lied with motorsport. Meanwhile, Ferruccio Lamborghini had no interest in racing at all. The result of that stance is that Lamborghini's motorsport pedigree pales in comparison to the immense racing legacy of Ferrari. One area where this is painfully obvious is at Le Mans. An insane amount of Ferraris have raced and won at Le Mans throughout the years, but the amount of Lamborghini entries is limited to only 6, and all of them were pretty disastrous. In this video, I'll be taking a look at each and every one of them. The first Lamborghini to be entered for the Le Mans 24 Hours was the Islero of Paul Ricci in 1975. Originally, he was going to do the race in a 911. The Lambo was his daily driver, but he liked the car so much he cancelled the original entry and set about modifying his daily driver into a race car. The GTX class the car would be entered in was fairly limiting in terms of modifications, so the Islero had to make do with slightly upgraded brakes and suspension. Perhaps the most drastic modification was the exhaust, which came from a V6 Ford Capri. The humble amateur crew and the mothballed luxury Grand Tourer turned race car would turn up at the qualifying woefully underprepared. The car was very unstable under braking, average speed over the course of one lap was terrible, a lot of time was lost tuning the car to run right with the Weber carburetors and Ford exhaust, and when it finally did, the lowered ride height made the exhaust scrape across the ground. The eventual best time posted was 5 minutes and 28 seconds, which put the car stone dead last on the timing table. For comparison, the second slowest car was a Chrysler Hemi Cuda, and that still went 13 seconds faster. The fastest GTX class car of the Ferrari North America racing team was a whopping 1 minute and 11 seconds faster. The Lambo then obviously failed to qualify. In a last-ditch attempt, it was crashed too. Plenty of reasons for Ricci to head home with the car on a trailer. To add salt to the wound, when Ricci got home he missed several phone calls from his friend who was still at the track. The Ferrari North America racing team pulled out all 4 of its cars due to a dispute between its manager and the race officials. They then had a few spots to fill on the grid and chose the Lamborghini. But since cell phones didn't exist yet, there was no way of contacting Ricci when he was driving home with the car. Ricci's one and only chance to race his Lambo at Le Mans was gone. For the next couple of years, 3 different Group C prototypes were made. These weren't official Lamborghinis, but rather bespoke chassis powered by Lamborghini engines, and they all aimed to compete at the Le Mans 24 Hours. First, there was the Countach QVX. Powered by a 5.7-litre V12 from the Countach Quattro Valvole, it only competed in a handful of races, and although it was signed up for the 1986 24 Hours of Le Mans, it never showed up. Then there was the Spice SE90C, a car popular with smaller privateer teams. It was tested with one of Lamborghini's new 3.5-litre V12 engines originally destined for F1, but even with factory support, the deal failed to materialize. All the cars would be powered by Cosworth DFY V8s instead. The Lambo engine did find its way into the Conrad KM011. That car did have a racing career, although it was a very troubled one. It raced in the 1991 World Sports Car Championship and never managed to achieve any point-scoring finishes. It was entered for the 1992 Le Mans 24 Hours, but just like the QVX, it never made it there mainly because of funding issues. A few years later, in 1995, Lamborghini gave Amos Racing a contract to build their first GT1 race car, dubbed the Diablo Iota GT1. With the Larousse F1 team involved, the project looked good on paper, and some test sessions were done deeming the car to be competitive. But due to a legal dispute between Amos and Lamborghini, the car never raced and is now in private hands. Lamborghini would try again in 1996 and now contacted the French Signe Advanced Technology to develop and build them a new GT1 car. Lamborghini would then provide them with a brand new 6-litre version of their V12, capable of an impressive 655 horsepower. Although the car was meant to race in Europe against contemporary GT1 giants like the Jaguar XJ220 and McLaren F1, and eventually find its way to Le Mans, it never did. Top brass at Lamborghini weren't keen on spending even more money on the project, and only 2 Diablo GT1s were ever built. One road car and one race car, which got sold to the Japanese Lamborghini Owners Club, better known as J-Log, who campaigned it for several seasons in the Japanese Grand Touring Car Championship with little success. J-Lock never took this car to Le Mans, but in 2006 the fan-favorite Japanese team took their then current race car, a Lamborghini Murcielago RGT, to Le Mans for what would be their first attempt at the 24-hour race. The RGT was built in collaboration between Audi, who had bought Lamborghini in 1998, and the German Reiter Engineering. This combo turned the Murcielago into an actual functioning race car that saw competition in a limited amount of championships around the world. The first attempt would be with support of Reiter Engineering, but not Lamborghini, who still had pretty much no interest in getting involved with motorsport. In Japan, J-Lock already had trouble keeping up with the rest of the Super GT field, and at Le Mans this was even worse, as the fully factory-backed Aston Martin and Corvette efforts were at the top of their game. As for the race, it was quickly left behind to run on its own, and it did so for 283 laps before it ground to a halt with a broken transmission. They were back the year after, now with support from the experienced French Dams team. Straight off the bat, disaster struck in the first qualifying session as the car crashed heavily. Driver Marco Apicella pretty much splitting the car in half and suffering from a severe concussion. He was rushed to the hospital and eventually fully recovered, but was deemed unfit to race. This left the team with only 2 drivers and half a car. A heroic effort was done to source a spare chassis and transplanting what they had left onto it. This normally wasn't allowed, but the ACO granted them an exemption due to the unforeseen circumstances. They miraculously managed to cobble together a car and made it to the starting line, only for the draftshaft to fail on lap 1, causing an instant retirement. In 2008, not J-Lock, but the Russian IPB Spartak fielded a lone Murcielago at Le Mans. While their lap times were better than J-Lock in 2006, the team did suffer from various amounts of issues, making them complete only 266 laps. To be qualified at the end of the race, however, you need to have done at least 70% of the distance the race winner did. And since that barrier was at 267 laps, the Lambo was exempt from official results. In 2009, J-Lock was back, and so was their bad luck. Driveshaft failure in the first practice session, faulty computer, a broken spoiler, lack of spare parts, seemingly nothing went their way. The team even failed to qualify, which prompted a majority of the crew, including one of the drivers, to head home. In an eerily similar fashion to the 1975 Islero, the ACO once again allowed the car to start anyway at the back of the grid. But since the team was short-staffed and had pretty much no spares in case something went wrong, they only completed 1 lap and drove straight into the pits to retire the car. Over the course of the entire Le Mans weekend, it only completed 20 laps. One final attempt was made in 2010 with the new Murcielago SVR, the car proving to be more reliable during practice, qualifying and the race. The car was fine, but the tires weren't. The selected Yokohamas were not up to the task and burst several times, one time taking a considerable amount of bodywork with it. To top it all off, a gearbox issue started to develop, and after hours of time was lost in the pits, the 70% distance rule started to creep in. It was clear they were never going to make the required amount of laps, so instead of soldiering on, the team retired the car after having completed just 138 laps. Lamborghinis at Le Mans are nothing short of cursed. Bizarre circumstances, mechanical failures and an insane amount of bad luck has stopped various teams from even finishing the event. One can only hope that all of the bad luck has been used up and that Iron Lynx in 2024 receive a good amount of karma when they race the Lamborghini LMDH car at Le Mans. When compared to all others that came before them, just finishing the race alone would be a monumental achievement. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it and subscribe if you don't want to miss out on the next one.